Hi, Roy here with a bit of an unboxing video. So within this package, I believe, is a just published omnibus of Marvel Conan the Barbarian comics. So how is it that an aged man is excited about a bunch of comics to the point of spending a non-trivial amount of cash on a collection of them? Well, thinking about what's brought us to this point, Conan the Barbarian, sword and sorcery hero, originally created in pulp magazines in the 30s by Robert E. Howard. I first encountered on a school trip to the Isle of Wight. So this was in a coach. It was in the last year of primary school, so I guess I was about 11. And the Isle of Wight, for non-Brits I suppose, is a small island off the south coast of England, famous among other things for its layers of coloured sand in some cliffs. So there are cliffs with these multicoloured layers, and you can get as a souvenir a sort of various glass things with the layers of sand in them, and that's a rite of passage really for every English person living in the south coast, is you've got to get one of these multicoloured sand things. So that was happening, and one of the other kids in the coach had a Marvel annual, and this was a bit of an oddity because it was a hardback annual in the British style, not published by Marvel Comics. It was published by Fleetway, or at least it was badged as a Fleetway annual. So these were the sort of annual publishers doing other ones from like war comics and things like that. So it was Marvel, and we knew not of Marvel, you know, comics meant like Superman and Batman. So this one had some green-skinned monster wearing tatty trousers on the front, brandishing a big army gun, and hurling lots of soldiers about. Soldiers depicted incongruously wearing what looked like purple or mauve dancing pumps, which lent the whole business a rather strange, sort of rather camp vibe. Anyway, this got passed around a bit, and leafing through it, one of the stories was a Conan story. That looked unlike anything else, that you'd expect to find in comics, and I kind of clocked this sort of warrior character as looking interesting. And that was about it. A few years later, in a town called Leighton Buzzard, came across the Conan paperbacks of the time and bought one of those and read them, and I've talked a lot about that. And I knew as a teenager that there were these Conan Marvel comics. You couldn't get them, or at least I couldn't get them. You know, they weren't imported readily. There weren't so many comic shops and things in those days. But eventually, British Marvel started publishing Conan reprints. So Conan had his own comic for a while, and it ended up merged with this one. So you'd get weekly episodes in black and white, typically chopped in half to fit in 3 stories within the comic. So in this one you get some Conan, you also get the Avengers and some Doctor Strange, and that was all lovely. But they're black and white. You kind of suspect that there's more to life than black and white. And obviously eventually there were comic book stores and stuff, and I read lots and lots of Conan comics over the years. Fairly recently I was actually reading one of Roy Thomas's memoirs. So Roy Thomas was the writer who wrote the stories that brought Conan into the sort of comic realm, and he's written a sort of blow-by-blow account of his recollections and personal views of how all that happened, which I thought would be a lot more interesting to read with the comics in front of me to look at. Hence, by the long way round, I have this book to look at. So, without any more ado, go. Right, well, I can tell you it's heavy. So, yes, there it's got the cover of what was Conan the Barbarian issue 1, and it's got a sort of cover gallery on the back of all the issues that are included. So those are mainly Conan the Barbarian, with some Savage Tales as well. That was a deliberately black and white comic book magazine. Yeah, so we've got Conan the Barbarian 1 to 26, Savage Tales 1 and 4. Because Savage Tales didn't just have Conan in it. So I do remember finding this issue 4 of Savage Tales with Conan brandishing a decapitated head on it in the shop at the back of our school, and taking it in, and Lou B. Jones, the physics teacher, took it off me and read it at the front of the class and tossed it back at me with a sneer. So, it's still wrapped up. Let's get the cellophane off. It has to happen, really, doesn't it? Okay, the cellophane is removed. Mostly. So it's a detachable dust jacket, so I'll have to get that off and do some protective work on that. Then you get an inner cover that's a lot simpler, very nice. End papers. So Barry Windsor Smith was the artist for a lot of these, and was a fantastic comic book artist. And I think in these early issues you see his evolution from someone who's sort of feeling their way into the work, drawing a lot on other artists, into his own very, very detailed style. So it looks like we got a big intro by the aforementioned Roy Thomas. That's good. And a big intro. The famous map of the Hyborian age of Conan, which was, so it's in a sort of imagined prehistory where all sorts of adventurous things can happen. So all these different countries have sort of historical analogues. So you get somewhere that's a bit like Egypt, and somewhere that's a bit like sort of medieval France, and somewhere that's a bit like India, and so on, sort of all mashed up together, which is fantastic. And then it looks like lovingly reproduced on fantastic paper stock, the comics themselves. So this is like to me, that's a kind of ultimate edition, really. They're the right more It's not on comic paper. It's on this kind of more kaolin filled white paper, which is lovely. And right, so they're reproducing stuff from the comics, like letters pages and things like that as well, by the look of it, which is good, to get the full experience. So these stories I remember well, but it'll be just great to go through them, and probably reading that Roy Thomas book on the side. And yeah, remembering those days, going to the newsagents to pick up me a weekly fix of this sort of thing. Also, somewhere in here, probably towards the end, we get the first appearances of Red Sonja, the she-devil with a sword, which is good. So I'm planning, oh yes, there she is. Yeah, that's a bit of a not safe for work image there. There she is having a swim. Yeah, so Red Sonja, I'm going to be reading a bunch of Red Sonja works next month, actually. So, including the comics where she first appeared. So, what a lovely book. Really pleased with that. It's, you know, just a great thing to put on the shelf and read. Right, unboxing accomplished. Thanks everybody. Back soon with something else. Bye.